Hello, Dr. Schwartz. It is so wonderful to have you with us today. How are you doing?
Oh, wonderful and great to be on the program. And thanks for the opportunity and thanks for all you're doing to create a more humane, environmentally sustainable world.
Well, that's incredibly kind of you. It's a great pleasure to have you on the show. Again, I've read the book, Vegan Revolution, Saving Our World and Revitalizing Judaism. I think it's a very interesting book and a very easy read, which I do appreciate. So why don't we,
Thank
yeah, well, before we get to the book, I'm curious, and you talk about in the beginning of the book, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, a little bit about the work you do as well?
Okay, well, I'm president emeritus of Jewish Veg. I was president for a number of years and I was on the board of that group. And for about 40 years, I've been involved. Let's see, well, you probably mentioned these. And I have three editions here, Judaism and Vegetarianism, and the book you just mentioned. And I'm trying to start a campaign. It's so important to get veganism onto the Jewish agenda, other agendas, and all regard to the threats like climate change, etc. And I've got 250 articles at the website jewishveg.com and then / my last name Schwartz, SCHWARTZ. And I'm anxious to get this word out, appreciate this opportunity, and have a debate with a rabbi that's going to be published in the Jerusalem Report in a month or so. And, doing all I can to spread that message. And very fortunately, living here in Israel about 4.5 years, been blessed with 4 grandchildren, getting married, and just this past Shabbat, as we speak, having a second great grandchild. And this is a great incentive for me. What kind of world do we want to leave them? And that's why I think it's essential there be a shift, major shift toward vegan diets in order to reduce climate change and improve the health of people and leave a decent world for future generations.
Wonderful. So first of all, Mazel Tov on the family edition, and good health and good safety to all of them, of course. And as you mentioned, you have written extensively over the years. I will admit that for Tu B'Shvat this year, I used some of your information for an educational program I did. So thank you for your writings. The title of your book, I want to break it down piece by piece. So let's start with the term vegan revolution is the top part of it. Why do you feel there needs to be a vegan revolution?
Okay, well, very unfortunately, the world is threatened as never before. Climate change is an existential threat to humanity, all of life on the planet. And I wish I could say this is my own crazy idea, but this is a super consensus of scientists, 97% of climate experts, every major science academy, and most important, of 1,000 peer-reviewed articles in respected scientific journals. Now, one of the most important groups, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and why they're so important is they're climate experts from many of the world's nations, so it's a consensus document. And in October 2018, they mentioned we may have only until 2030 to make what they called unprecedented changes in order to have a chance to avoid a climate catastrophe. And we're seeing that, by the way, 2020 just tied 2016 for the hottest year on record. And 2016 had an El Nino that increased the temperature. So the fact that 2020 tied it without that is significant. Every one of the 21 years in this century is in the top 22 hottest years. And so we have that. And very briefly, the glaciers are melting, the polar ice caps are melting, the permafrost is melting, which is going to release methane, carbon dioxide. And there's been an increase in the severity and frequency of heat waves, storms, floods, wildfires, and droughts. And summing it up in the words of former California Governor Jerry Brown, humanity is on a collision course with nature. So this is why it's imperative there be a major shift toward vegan diets. And as we speak, as you know, this horrible pandemic, there's tremendous evidence that was caused by the major production of animals and the consumption of animals widely, and at least 5 or 6 of the previous pandemics also. So many other reasons, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Sure, and I know in many communities it's become very popular for, I would say, plant-based individuals to point out that eating tofu or eating plant-based didn't start pandemics. The idea of the connection between treatment of animals and how we've gotten to pandemics. So it's a very big topic to discuss. So I would love to talk to you because we both live on the planet, so saving the world I think is very important. But revitalizing Judaism, I think for many people, when you mention the idea of veganism and Judaism, it's not the thing you automatically assume goes together. So I'm curious if you can talk about why being vegan can revitalize Judaism and what is the connection between the two.
Okay, there's two major connections. First, it's right in the very first chapter, chapter 1, verse 29 of the Torah, God's first regiment, strictly vegetarian. All the great commentators agree on that. And by the way, that's consistent with what modern scientists have found, that humans are much closer to herbivorous animals than to carnivorous animals. In terms of our hands, of course, we don't have the claws of a carnivorous animal. We don't have the sharp, hard, dagger-like teeth of a carnivorous animal. Our stomach acid is only 1/20th as strong as an omnivorous or carnivorous animal, and our digestive system very long, which is wonderful for digesting fruits and vegetables, plenty of time for the vitamins and minerals to be absorbed, but terrible when meat is in that system. Then in addition, so that's the beginning, Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, they say chapter 1, verse 29. Now, the end, which hopefully will be symmetric, the Messianic age that Jews yearn for, according to Rav Kook, Chief Rabbi of Free State Israel, and other commentators, that ideal time, the Messianic period, will also be vegetarian or vegan. And he based that on the powerful prophecy of Isaiah that in that ideal Messianic time, the wolf will dwell with the lamb, the lion will stalk the ox, no one shall hurt nor destroy in all of God's holy mountain. But so that's a little bit on the Torah, but there's much in there. Permission was given to eat meat, by the way, after the flood in Noah's time, but a reluctant concession. But the important thing is that there are 6 very powerful, fundamental to Judaism mandates that point to veganism as the ideal Jewish diet. And I'll just list the 6, and I'll be happy to go into detail on the Jewish teachings and how far the realities are. And these 6, again, fundamental, basic mandates: take care of our health, treat animals with compassion, protect the environment, conserve natural resources, help hungry people, and seek and pursue peace. And in every case, the realities are far from these powerful Jewish teachings.
So let me ask you, I want 2 questions involving specifically Judaism and veganism. One, and you actually write about this in the book, I think very eloquently. You quote a different book where you talk about the idea of kosher and being vegan, the idea of, you're not supposed to harm animals, and yet we see all the time with factory farming and many other things, animals are sadly being harmed, torture, and obviously we could, talk about the killing of animals in general. But you talk about the idea of what is kosher, and I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that. What is the connection of, being the ideas of not doing harm as a Jewish value, and connecting that with, veganism? Because I think it's a very interesting lens of looking at it.
Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, Judaism has very powerful teachings on compassion for animals. We Jews are to be Rahmanim b'nei Rahmanim, compassionate children of compassionate ancestors, imitating God, whose compassion is over all of his works. That's in Psalms 145, number 9. The great Jewish teachers, Moses, King David, were deemed suitable to be Jewish leaders because of showing compassion and shepherds in their youth. And it's so important. It's part of commandments, which indicates not only are human beings to rest on the Sabbath day, but animals as well. Many other teachings like that. Now, the laws of Shechita, ritual slaughter, were designed also to minimize pain only a sacred individual saying a bracha or a blessing beforehand could do it, very sharp knife, etc. But unfortunately, a couple of things now with such mass production so rapidly that often at the slaughterhouses it's not carried out properly. But the important thing is the spirit of the kashrut laws. Something technically, something that is kosher because it was done again by a very pious person, a sharp knife and all that. But the fact that, for example, the animals on factory farms are treated so horribly, all the natural instincts thwarted and all that. And give one example, this is why we go from vegetarianism to veganism. Dairy cows are artificially impregnated every single year, so they constantly given milk. And even it's done what the industry itself calls rape racks. And the calves, baby cows are taken away right away, sometimes to be raised as veal or later on to be other milk giving animals. So it's the spirit of the things. That's why I try to introduce it, that Judaism does have these powerful teachings on compassion for animals, summarized in the wonderful phrase, Sa'ah Ba'alei Chayim, not to cause any sorrow or pain to animals. So, and that's why Rabbi David Rosen, who I quote, in the book quite a bit, a former chief rabbi of Ireland, indicates that it's like halakhically unjustified or unjustified based on Jewish law to the way animals are raised, and also because the important issue of health, that many peer-reviewed studies in scientific journals, very well-respected scientific journals, indicate that we could reduce heart disease, cancer, other life-threatening diseases quite a bit by shifting to plant-based diets. And to take care of our health is arguably the most important Jewish mitzvah. Now, I argue that for a number of reasons, in addition to the fact that, in order to perform the other mitzvot, one has to be healthy. There are 613 mitzvot in Judaism. Only one of them used the word, losing it for a minute, means very, only one of them, and that's Shmatem Me'od, that's the word Ma'od. In the Shmatem Me'od, the Mafshotehem, we should diligently guard our souls. The rabbis interpret that as diligently guard our health. And also of the 613 mitzvot, 610, all but 3 can be overridden if a life is in danger or health is endangered. So that is why we have the kosher laws. They were designed to minimize pain, very positive things, but the realities and how animals are raised and the negative effects on health and the environment. By the way, major contributor to climate change is the animal-based diets, largely because of methane emitted from cows. And the methane is up to 84 times as potent as carbon dioxide in the 20 years it's in the atmosphere.
So first of all, I appreciate you speaking about it in detail. And again, one of the things in your book is you speak about these different topics in such a way that's very easy to read and understand, which I very much appreciate. One of the other topics I wanted to mention, and you mentioned it near the end of the book, but it has to do with Judaism, is in regards to Jewish laws regarding using things from the animal. So like leather for tefillin, using the ram's horn for the shofar. These are part of Jewish law. So a lot of people who want to be plant-based, if you try doing an alternative such as like a plastic shofar, for example, technically that's in violation. So I'm curious from your perspective, is there any sort of, do you think there's any sort of middle ground? Is there a path for the laws to be changed? Like, what do you think in those type of circumstance where in Judaism or potentially other religions that have such laws, where do you go from there?
Okay, well, the ideal to enhance a mitzvah is that these parts, the leather or the ram's horn, should come from an animal that lives a life that, without being oppressed, etc., and died a natural death. So that would be enhancing the mitzvah effect, in that it's almost like a recycling effect in the world. But unfortunately, due to economic reasons, that generally doesn't happen. So that would be ideal. And hopefully people can use, to fill in maybe that they inherit from a father, or use to fill in, or something like that. So that is an issue, but that is relatively small compared to the tremendous number of animals that are killed for food. And most of the time, that is a side effect. It's not the major reason that animals are killed.
No, very interesting. So let me follow up by asking, because in your book, in the beginning of it, which I appreciated, because I think there's a false narrative that, to be vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, like you had to have started young and, you had to have lived it your whole life. But you have a very interesting story about how you went from not plant-based to vegetarian, because of course you have the book, Judaism and Vegetarianism, to vegan. I was wondering if you could share a little bit of that with us.
Okay, how I became a vegetarian, for example.
Yeah.
Okay, actually, it started teaching mathematics at the College of Staten Island. And one of the courses was for liberal arts and science majors. They were not very fond of math, but they had to take one math course to meet a degree requirement. And I came up with the idea of teaching course mathematics and the environment. And by the way, that gave me like the secular background which I needed in the book to combine it with the Judaism part. So math in the environment, it was basic math with probability, statistics, sequences, graphs, and things like that. Relatively beginning level, because again, these liberal arts and science students, I want to have the idea that math can help them understand the world, to interpret a graph, to know if it said 54% in a survey vote for this candidate, the other, how that was obtained, what it meant. And we tried to tie it with real world events. And one year it was World Hunger. Initially, I thought, it's a shame so many people dying of hunger. It's just not enough food for all the people. But then I read this wonderful book by Frances Moore-Pay called Diet for a Small Planet. And she pointed out the tremendous wastefulness of animal-based diets. Millions of people were dying at that point. They indicated like 20 million people dying every year, 10% or so, even more chronically malnourished, and yet 70% of the grain produced in the US being fed to animals destined for slaughter. And by the way, what makes it even more shameful, it's not enough that we're feeding all this grain to animals while people are starving, but we take very healthy foods like corn and oats and soy, high in fiber and healthy complex carbohydrates, devoid of cholesterol and saturated fat. We cycle it in effect through the animal. We end up with meat and other animal products that are just the opposite. No fiber, no complex carbohydrates, very high in saturated fat, and very high in cholesterol. And that's why there's an epidemic of disease in the Jewish community and some of the other communities. And unfortunately, doctors are not given enough training on this. I think it's so shameful. We can reduce, again, the heart disease, cancer, other life-threatening diseases in that way. Anyway, after reading that book and discussing it with students, after a couple of years, I took my own advice, giving up first cold cuts, red meat, etc., chicken, fish, and then later on, realizing, as I said before, how terribly dairy cows are raised, how terribly egg-laying hens are treated, shifted to veganism, and one more convinced. You have to get the ideas out there. And very thankfully, as I pointed out, Judaism has these powerful teachings. I feel sometimes I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I appreciate your compliments about the book, but one thing that helps is I'm able to quote such powerful teachings in Judaism. As Jew interested in all these issues, certainly, God forbid, does not have to go to another religion. Judaism has these very important teachings. In another one of my books, I argue that Judaism is a radical religion in the best sense of the term. powerful teachings. Tzedek, tzedek, te'adof, we should pursue justice, pursue peace, be kind to the stranger, and be co-workers with God in protecting the environment, many other examples.
So one thing that I enjoy listening is, you connect the need for the vegan revolution being plant-based and, Judaism in such a manner that it's very interconnected, which I think is a wonderful thing. So let me ask, so in the book and as through this interview, you've mentioned obviously the importance of it for climate change reasons, for health reasons, for animal liberation reasons. So you actually are organizing a campaign around this book and doing some work around the book. I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about that. What are you working on? What is it? What does it look like, or what do you hope for it to become?
Okay, well, we're using every possible opportunity. For example, not too long ago, we had Tu B'Shvat.
Mhm.
I actually led 4 Tu B'Shvat Seders.
Wonderful.
That's a miracle of Zoom. I was able to do it just sitting right here where I am right now in the same office. If I had to travel, of course, couldn't do it. So 4 Tu B'Shvat Seders, and of course, that's the most environmental Jewish holiday, the most vegan Jewish holiday. Then, of course, that was a holiday reestablished by the Kabbalists after it became relatively not observed that much, because after the temple in Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 of the Common Era, it was not necessary to have the ties related to trees, which was really the basis for Tu B'Shvat. Using that as a model, for example, I and some others are trying to reestablish one of the other. There's 4 Jewish New Years. We all know about Rosh Hashanah, Tu B'Shvat's another. There was also a New Year for animals, and that was for tithing animals for sacrifices. So initially, didn't want to get involved in that, but then I realized, why don't we renew, restore that holiday, but transform it into a holiday, a day devoted to teaching or increasing awareness about the Jewish teachings about compassion for animals, a few examples of which I gave before, and how far the realities are from these teachings. So I think I've got 4 articles on the internet about that. So this is one of the things. And of course, I'm trying to get on many programs. So once again, I appreciate this opportunity, and writing different articles and trying to do much more, because I think we should respectfully challenge the environmentalists, who are wonderful, all credit to them, but not connecting enough to the diet. And people concerned about climate change, people concerned about hunger, should be pointing out that 70% of grain in the US, about a third worldwide, being fed to animals. And certainly doctors, who again are very dedicated people, but should be telling people how many benefits, health benefits of plant-based diets. And rabbis, again, by the way, Jewish Veg group I'm president emeritus of, is coming out maybe in the next month with a statement on veganism that was signed by 150 rabbis. So there's quite a bit very positive going on there, but many rabbis are not bringing this up, just at least for discussion. It should be discussed. And the connection to climate change, the biggest threat to humanity, the most important ethical, religious, environmental, economic issue. So all of these should be an agenda, and that's part of my campaign, to try to get these issues onto the agenda in a very respectful way, and to have respectful dialogue. And that's one of the purposes of my book, to start some respectful dialogues.
So let me ask you, and I know you've brought it up a little bit in this conversation, but if people want to read your articles, if people want to know how to start the discussion, if people want to read your book, where are the best places for people to find the book, to find your writings, to get involved, or to learn more, to potentially get involved?
Right. Okay, again, I have that website, jewishveg.com/Schwartz, SCHWARTZ. And by the way, I have the 3rd edition of my book, Judaism and Vegetarianism, there. I have more than 250 articles there. And for example, I have articles relating vegetarianism, veganism to every single Jewish holiday and Shabbat. And if people want to get involved and help in this campaign, you always use some voluntary help, they can email me at vegierich@gmail.com. That's VEGIERICH two G's, I-E, and first four letters, my last name, R-I-C-H, my first name, reggierich@gmail.com. So again, this is the most important issue, and I hope everybody is going to be seeing this video will go to the local rabbi and very respectful say, I heard somebody talking about this. It seemed interesting. He says that Jews should be vegetarians, vegans. Can we put that on the agenda? Can we discuss it? Can you as a rabbi either give a class on it or a sermon on it at least? According to this person that was interviewed, he says climate change is threatening the whole world. And maybe according to climate experts, we only have 10 years to make these unprecedented changes. Can't we just do business as usual in the face of this? Why can't we have this? Maybe we should start an environmental committee, social justice committee, because Judaism has beautiful rituals and all, but it's important to put these rituals into practice and all. Otherwise, it's like saying, look, wonderful teachings while next door they're being violated and we're ignoring those violations.
So I want to give you an opportunity for any sort of final thoughts. I think you've done a very good job explaining, again, the book, connections, all that information. But, is there a message for whomever is watching this right now that you want their takeaway, I suppose, to be? Any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Okay, so three major takeaways. Number one, the world's heading to a climate catastrophe, so much so that all of human life is threatened. 100 years from now, it's possible there could be no human life. I mean, it sounds like a very radical statement, but we realize that since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the temperature's gone up about 1.1 degrees Celsius, which is about 2 degrees Fahrenheit, and that has caused these amazing heat waves, the fires in California causing smoke so severe that the air quality is worse than that of Beijing, Shanghai, cities in Asia. So that's one. Second, that there's no way we're going to avert a climate catastrophe unless there's a major shift toward vegan diets. Again, many other things have to be done, of course. That's in mathematical terms necessary, but not sufficient. Third takeaway is that veganism is by far the diet most consistent. I'm repeating this, but this is so super important. It's the diet most consistent with Jewish fundamental teachings, taking care of our health, treating animals with compassion, conserving natural resources, protecting the environment, helping hungry people, seeking and pursuing peace. And also to reduce, we have the potential to reduce sharply the negative effects. I'm hearing the senior citizens, residents, older people, and unfortunately, so many diseases and all that could be prevented by shifts toward vegan diets. So many thanks for this opportunity, and I wish you continued success and many other good interviews in the future.
No, I was going to say thank you very much, Dr. Schwartz, for joining us. Again, for everyone, the book is Vegan Revolution, Saving Our World, Revitalizing Judaism. You can also use the resources that were just said by Dr. Schwartz. Dr. Schwartz, have a wonderful day today. And for everyone out there, including yourself, of course, stay safe and stay healthy. Have a wonderful day.